Welcome to Talking Apes, the construction industry's very own podcast that we're kind of taking on as a little bit of a passion project here to talk a little bit about a few things that we think could really be, you know, we could open some eyes to in the industry, whether it's on the sales side, whether it's on the contracting side, the wholesale side, just, general industry trends that we've noticed. And maybe even take some learning out of this, right? And that's kind of a part of the conversation. And we're very excited to have you here as our first guest. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Vershan had given me, Thomas and Jeff, an overview of what your game plan are or game plan going forward plans. Very impressed. Firstly, it's a very, as you're learning or already know, a very old network or old industry, so stuck in the past, without a doubt, needs to be brought to the forefront or more importantly to the 21st century, and I'm glad I can help.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, we're definitely very, very, very grateful for you for being here. So maybe we'll kind of start things off with a little bit of a conversation on kind of what your background is. I know that Jeff and yourself kind of share a little bit of a background in the sense that both of you kind of come from the contracting world, and that's kind of been the start, and then sales has been really what's been a big part of both of your lives. And maybe we can kind of contrast some of those opinions and see what your guys' stories were and how they match and how they differ from one another.
That's a great topic. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear what got you firstly into the industry, excuse me.
Well, actually, I'm a four generations plumbing pipe fitting family. So it didn't really matter if I wanted to be a tradesperson; it was just happening. So,
Well said.
um, so Christmas dinners and family gatherings were quite interesting because half of us were union and half of us were non-union. Um,
Wow.
so Grandma came up with a rule that no more at the dining room table
Smart.
discussions. um,
Ah,
so starting off quite young, I remember in when there was not a lot of safety on in the industry. I remember 10, 11 years old, I was on a job site, and
sure.
how I got paid back then was for every toilet or every fixture I delivered, I got paid a quarter. So
Look at that.
no elevators and four flights, and I had really good cardio as a teenager. So.
Wow. Isn't
uh,
that impressive?
but
Isn't that impressive?
it was interesting. I I had some good mentors along the way who really taught me to take care of my own future. And part of
Smart.
that was, there was this this big stigma about staying within a company for years at a time, and kind of
Sure.
you start with one company and then you finish with that company, and that was your overall goal. And a couple of my kind of close friends that were kind of looking after me, so to say, were like, "No, you'll never become a complete tradesman unless you do everything."
100%.
And so I ended up doing in my first couple of years, like when I was actually getting paid to work, not just weekends and after school, doing residential so that you can touch all the different products. You knew
Right.
your drain, your gas, your your fixture installations, everything. And then I went to commercial, and I started playing with more blueprints, more. You had a tighter schedule to follow. There was more of the business side of things that you had to follow. And then my last, when I decided to go after my steam fitting ticket, was getting into the industrial side of things.
Well, well.
Um, so so for me, it was kind of I got to touch a lot of different products and see what I enjoyed the most, and asked a lot of questions, and didn't talk back. I found out the hard way on that a couple of times.
That's the truth.
So that was interesting, and then there was one guy that I worked with once I got my ticket, who was a service guy, and I saw him doing sales.
Aha.
And that's when it changed for me, because that was a lot more uh, working with the end user. There was a lot more planning. There was listening to overcoming problems or creating solutions that people need to overcome. And that was my transition right there. I'd say almost immediately into the sales and the business side from just being like in the trade side.
Correct, on the tools.
Yeah.
What year was that? Do you recall that year?
Oh, I got my ticket in '98. So that would have been like 2000. I moved right into the sales side because I was not into being in the trades. There was not a lot of specialty things back then. They're like high efficiency wasn't a thing yet. You know, you were just kind of doing mundane, oversized everything, and it would work, right?
Exactly.
You know, stuff like that.
I remember.
Yeah. So, you know, we didn't even have cell phones, right? So you couldn't even look up cool things. So yeah, I'd say it was probably back then. 98 is when 98 2000 to 2000 is where I became in sales.
I
That's impressive.
I almost wonder, you know, you're talking about cell phones and not being able to kind of see the newest, coolest technology. Was that maybe the role of the salesperson back, you know, in that non-cell phone, non-internet age, where the salesperson for those products or the agent or the wholesaler, they bring you new technology. And that's why maybe the industry moved at a significantly slower pace than it does right now. And I feel like maybe what do you think about that?
Personally, I think it actually moved faster back then because you had a relationship with everybody you sold to, right? Now, your relationship for the most salespeople is on their phone. Sometimes they don't even see their customers, so there is nothing, right?
Vresh makes a great point, as do you. Jeff's right, and Vresh, the sales pace did in fact happen. You think about that transition for Jeff, just in this example. Bowen had a very popular faucet at the time, a model number 7300 for a kitchen deck faucet. Delta had a standard everyday deck faucet, kitchen faucet, the Delta 100. So you're right. Those were the common everyday default items. It's so interesting that we start the conversation off here, knowing that 4Media is actually targeting this very opportunity even today. So I close on this. I go back to my time. I began my journey back in, believe it or not, what do you hear for the date? Are you sitting down, gents? I started my apprenticeship in 1979.
I was born that year.
Isn't that crazy? 1979. And quickly for myself, I was trained, as were you, and most apprentices, by a very, very good plumber. And we have identical transition. That was my goal, as it was yours, to touch and learn as quick as we could to understand. Obviously, our mechanical aptitude and hands-on side was we're ahead of the most. I had my own. Are they ready for this? In the 5-year apprenticeship, 2.5 years into the apprenticeship, I had my own truck and my own apprentice.
Yeah.
Remember those days?
Oh yeah.
So same thing. We were just using the standard default items. And Vreshin's right. Let's go back a half step. The plumbing wholesalers, and at the time would have been Westburn, who are now Wolseley, as we know it, and Emco. So Emco and
Western
Wolseley
Supplies.
today, Western Supplies. You're right. Yeah. We did have some branches here in the East. So there's where it was. They were true. This is so important you hear this. Back in the 80s and into the, call it mid-90s, wholesalers or plumbing distributors, we like to use the term wholesalers for this reason. They, in fact, really were wholesalers. Today, respectfully, they're referred to as half sailors. Yeah. And with that, they did have the inventory, and the sales reps really did. They realized the value of a sample, which is still today 75% of a close is to have a hard sample with you. And that's what they did, Russian, to your very point. So the customers could touch it, feel it. There's a piece of literature. What's my price? To Jeff's now point is now it's simply Google it, whether you use your voice or type it in, and there's your 20 now different options. What's the price point? Who has it? When can I get it? What's my time frame? So yes, it's sped up to the speed of light today, to Jeff's point.
Now, Greg, do you think that back then, like often we see 20 or 30 of competing lines on the shelf in a wholesale. Was even the product with the manufacturer to a wholesale more relationship based, or was that consistent today as it was back then, where you have multiple product lines?
Great question. It was interesting. There weren't buying groups such as now AD Plumbing and Heating Canada or Octo. So to your very point, at the time there were approximately in the 80s there were approximately 70, maybe 80 MCO locations nationally, and Westburn's something similar. Yes, Western Supply is a true independent. Niagara Plumbing Supply down in Niagara Falls. So you're right. The relationship was for said company, said manufacturer, to line up with one or the other. So you'd want to, American Standard, for instance, would want to partner up with either Westburn at the time and or EMCO, A, giving them national exposure, B, providing them with a rebate, C, most importantly, part of the initiation or part of the program was they, the plumbing distributor, had to in fact stock all the American Standard products to fulfill the order. So really they were the local stocking distributor, enjoying the profit and the rebate. So back in the day, to your point, there weren't as many competitors. Faucet-wise, there was Delta, Moen, Valley, no Price Pfister at the time in the 80s. So that was really a narrow, Kohler wasn't in the market, nor Toto. Really, it was American Standard and or Crane.
Yep.
Crane were the dominant manufacturer
Or Canada.
in the Canadian market. Correct.
That's funny. You say Canada. That's where Greg was back in the day. They started the company Granada, right?
I 100% correct.
They kind of started that whole kind of movement.
Yeah, we realized we had a second and third shift available at our steel, or at the, I would say our, but at the steel enamel factory in Stratford, Ontario. And when I discovered in one of the board meetings that the first shift covered all the burden and all the costs for the actual facility, and they were turning the lights out, a second shift and third shift. So there we were sitting in a boardroom while we're on this topic. And the president said, we need to open up a second company and target the US market. Our dollar, by the way, was worth, as it is today, ironically, $1.45 exchange.
Yeah.
So that's what prompted the president to say, hey, let's look to the US. So fast forward, we did. And to Vreshn's point, we sold the second and third shift out in, you ready? 15 months with 4 reps. We were selling tubs at $69 US, converting up to 100. So it was profit on top of profit. And where the term or the name Granada came in was the president said, we need a name because there's a Crane US. And someone come up with, hey, let's just use Canada and drop an R in it. And there it was, just like that. Crazy.
No, it's so within that, when do you think the shift happened? When, like, do you think as technology kicked in, that was the shift of everybody having everything?
Great question. So I've been blessed, as many others, and now that you know my time frame, to actually watch that evolution occur. And here's what happened. So we go back to that conversation a bit earlier where the national, of course, we know the two nationals, and the independents. Everyone had their piece of the pie. And the number, because I was blessed to work with Crane's, you ready? Crane's national top line sales in the 80s and as far into the 90s, right up through 97, $62 million in total sales. That's their vitreous china, acrylic, steel enamel for the nation. Again, no Toto, no Elger, no Kohler. So to answer your question specifically, what occurred was the plumbing, this is so important, the plumbing contractor, the plumbing and or mechanical contractor realized that there was a benefit, this is so important to hear this, that when the American Standard rep called on the plumber and or the mechanical to, of course, secure a position on new projects coming, the mechanicals realized that they were held hostage to one supplier for that one brand that the engineers called out. And being, of course, handcuffed, they encouraged the manufacturer, similar to the manufacturer's reps, which we're all familiar with, to look to open up another supplier so the mechanical could leverage the two distributors against each other to get a better price. And that's when things changed, because Now, when the second distributor was opened up, the sour taste in the distributor who actually were first to come on board had a full inventory. Now that business was now being cannibalized and watered down and diluted with a second supplier. And Jeff, that's what opened the door to other manufacturers to come into the market across the entire plumbing.
So why is it that why is it back then that they couldn't get equal to and battle it? I find it interesting that there's a lot of products that are out there that have equal to the features that the engineer or the designer are looking for, and
Correct.
keep the brand still separated, right?
Well said. To that very point, that also, and you're alluding to it, that's what also helped drive U.S. companies to look into our course market, Australian companies, European
Yep.
companies. We were small at the time. We're currently 36 million people. You go back to the 80s, 90s, we were in that 30, 31 million. So it wasn't a big market. In fact, most companies worldwide, even today, look at Canada, specifically the entire nation, as a territory,
Yeah.
relevant to the size of the population. So circle back, picture you as the president of EMCO, and you've committed to America's Standard. You've had 15, 20 years worth of great business, and then America's Standard choose. And this is why plumbing wholesalers and distributors today always ask, anytime you're pioneering a new line, are you opening up anyone else? Are you going to market through select distribution? Are you looking for mass distribution? Do you want us to build the brand and then you're going to take it and open it up? Well, that's what happened, folks, quite frankly. And this is so important. The plumbing contractor drove this. The mechanical contractor drove this. They love beating down that manufacturer or that distributor to, of course, the or equal products.
Yep.
And or the products to leverage from a price point position. And here's why. The general contractor, they always look for a better price, as you well know, on a hospital, an arena, whatever the project is. So that forced the mechanicals to say, where can I tighten up? I can't fight my labor. That's a known number. It's on my purchase. So if you, Mr. Manufacturer, can get another supplier to stock the product, I can leverage the two against each other, and I can pick up an extra X amount of thousands to hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And that's what opened the door.
But see, I think what I find interesting then is that a lot of wholesales wouldn't carry those project parts, right? Like they wouldn't actually be stocking distributors. They would be a carrying distributor that would only bring those in just to kind of one up their competitor.
Send me the PO, I'll give you the inventory for that PO.
Absolutely. And therein lies now the concrete and to confirm the term half sailors.
Yeah.
100%.
So how did you transition from I call it relationship based selling, which was back then, to I would say now volume sales, and so how did you make that transition in those times where now you were just opening up anybody who would carry a catalog on the shelf?
Got it.
And then like from that, how detrimental was that in terms of introducing new products? So
and your integrity.
Two-part.
Great question. Two great questions. So let's take it and break it down. Let me take it to 1983. I'm in a crawl space, and the plumber has at this point taught me the trade, bright man. He said to me in the crawl space, Greg, I don't know if you know it or not, but hey, you've got a great personality and you get along with people. And I don't even think you know that you've got that natural ability. He went on to state that, you should consider, once you get your ticket, to open up your own mechanical firm. And Vresh has heard this, and or get into the sales and marketing side of the business, working with a large plumbing manufacturer, staying within the industry. So I took that to heart. And my guess, it was 6 months. I asked different people of their opinions, and it kept defaulting back to sales. Here's where, now to answer the first part of your question. So here I am, still wearing my work clothes and work boots, and I thought, how do I make that quantum leap to get into the sales side of the business. And that's not easily done, as you can well
Oh
imagine.
yeah, yeah.
Right? So, as fortune would have it, the plumbing contractor that I was working with, I had earned my ticket. I'm now earning $35,000 a year for a 40-hour week, which was big money back in
Oh,
1983. Right?
yep.
Never mind the side jobs and cash jobs. The plumbing contractor was opening a plumbing showroom. So I go back to Vreshen's comment earlier. In the late 80s and early 90s, there weren't as many showrooms as there are today. So yes, the plumbing wholesaler really was the influencer to the plumbing contractor and mechanicals for Mr. and Mrs. Smith for the renovations. So the showroom was being built. And I said to the owner, I'd love to work in that showroom. Well, he kind of looked at me funny and went off home. The next morning, true story, he showed up and he said, Greg, before you go in that job, I got something for you. I talked to my wife last night, and Christina thinks you'd be perfect for that showroom. And this all happened within no more than 30 hours. And I looked at him, I said, great. And he said, well, hang on a second. We didn't budget $35,000 for a showroom person. I said, what did you budget? He said, 22,000. I stuck my hand out. He didn't even get it out of his mouth, and I was shaking his hand saying, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Isn't that funny? So I took that cut and pay to make the quantum leap. And then this is what happened. Second answer to your question, or the second question. So I'm now in the showroom. We've completed it. And income, you ready? The American Standard rep, the Kohler rep, the Moen rep, the Delta rep. And I watched them. I thought, that looks like the job that I'm after. I'd love to be that when I grow up. Car allowance, gas card, no cell phones at the time. Territory,
Pocket full of
sales
quarters.
targets. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, a bunch. Standing in the winter.
Yeah, yeah.
My favorite was standing in the phone booth with your quarters all stacked up on top of the phone. Crazy. So I thought I'd be smart while we're on that topic. Hey, I could go to the phones that it's in the front foyer of the shopping malls where they're heated. Well, that turned out to be a terrible idea with the crying kids and the babies coming through, and it echoed, Greg, where are you? Greg, where are you? Anyhow, so I did. I ended up taking a job with a plumbing sales agency. And that's when I fell in love with the sales side. And the sales agency was very, very, very cautious of their brand that they had built over the years and their integrity. So we went to market with new products through select distribution. So not mass. So we literally would in fact go back to the 80s, 90s and partner with a plumbing distributor and give them special nets and price the competitors 15 to 25% higher, which Vresh and I did in our past life. So that now we have a partner who's prepared to bring an inventory in, go to war with us, enjoy, I called it the pioneering profit. And we actually closed, Vresh and heard the presentation. We would close the presentation on the program with this. There was a day that AMCO, if they were the chosen partner, didn't have $1 in business. Now look at them today. There was a day that Moen didn't have $1 in business. Now look at them today. So if we do what we have just now agreed on, there's going to be a day that Vresh and Jeff or myself are going to get a phone call from your competitor. And when they do, because that's going to happen, we may as well put that on the table. Here's what we're going to do to protect our integrity, our business relationship, is that when that day happens, it could be 38 months from now, that next distributor has to double the inventory at that time that you're carrying to enjoy the same price that you're enjoying today. And now you know what your competitor's price is, as do they. And they've had to bring in, say you've got 30,000, they had to commit to a $60,000 inventory. And let's finish on, and it can't be a part of a project. It can't be it's got to be inventory commitment.
Yeah.
You got it. So that's how we went to market, to be clean and integrity.
And I feel like that almost puts the onus back on your partner to be a true partner. And I think this is something that Jeff and I really had a lot of conversations in our recent gig that we had together, was having conversations with manufacturers as a distributor, really trying to bring back that concept of a two-way partnership where there's two parties that are both interested in the same same thing, which is, growing your business and getting more sales and bringing in more customers. And I think that was something that a lot of the vendors that we dealt with at the time, Jeff would probably have a little bit more exposure to that, given your role within the actual procurement and whatnot. A lot of manufacturers were a little bit surprised at the level of commitment that, we were showing in them as a distributor. Would you not agree?
Well, you know what I always found very interesting in the sales process was you'd get a manufacturer come into the boardroom or the coffee shop or wherever the heck you were meeting, and they'd spit out all these figures, and you'd be like, yep, yep, yep. And you'd wait for the manufacturer to leave, and then you'd sit at your table and be like, well, why are we selling so much of brand X and not anything of brand Y and this?
There you go.
And what I always the biggest thing that I always wanted to do was be able to have that open dialogue with the manufacturer, right? Okay, let's study it. Let's analyze it, right? Okay, you guys are getting beat up by these competitors, right? So what now not you, we have to come up with a strategy to overcome that, right? And that was kind of the relationship-based selling. Now, when we would sit down and have those conversations, a lot of manufacturers, they were just like, no, no, no. Like, you guys are not being honest with us. You're going to carry 8 other brands, and we expect that, and that's what everybody does, and right. And so I think our first month we had to be like, no, no, no. This is on the level. We're going to try this. Like,
See that?
And
right?
See that?
it's almost a testament to kind of what a lot of the, not all of the industry, but it's a testament to almost what a lot of the industry has come to, where there's not a lot of faith in the distribution channels, from the manufacturing side, as well as, and we kind of joke about wholesaler, half seller, but it's a reality that there's good relationships between maybe individuals and individual, entities within the businesses, but as a whole, I think there's really been a drop off in the intertwined relationship between a wholesale, a wholesale distributor, a manufacturer, and, God forbid there's an agent involved in that as well, and that also tends to, throw up a lot of red flags with people as well. So there, instead of there being synergy, in a lot of cases there's friction, and with that friction, I think we lose a lot of, business optimization opportunities.
Can we talk about
Yeah,
that?
no,
Can we talk about
absolutely.
that?
What are your thoughts?
Well, well said, and it's the industry has certainly evolved to that. So that solutions-based selling, a manufacturer looking to grow their share in certain markets, a manufacturer choosing to go to market through independent rep agencies, that's all real-world stuff. So now to your great point, let's look at the distributor walk and what you gentlemen have both been involved in. You're on the HVAC side and the plumbing side. HVAC side is a little different, where you've got multiple manufacturers, to your point. On the plumbing side, not as many. So some of the dynamics are a little different, yet similar here. So picture this. It's Vreshen's sales and marketing. Vreshen represents a line of baseboard. However, Vreshen also represents a line of XYZ. So important. Depending on the strength of said agency in any market, if you've got a strong agency in your right, Vreshen, who knows how to work with the distributor, knows how to manage their business so that they don't trip over in their integrity, this is key, knows how to get to the engineers and or to the developer to have their product specified, now all of a sudden there's a demand and a need in the market for products. Here's where it gets clumsy. The plumbing distributor or the HVAC distributor, here's the part where a new person coming into our industry, they sit back and go, what? So they call Vreshen's marketing for pricing, but also specified is a competing baseboard heating product. But you notice that distributor doesn't ask you for a price on your product that's equal. It's called out as an or equal, to Jeff's point. So there is where you got oil and water now boiling to the surface, where your distributor, who really is the bank, let's be serious here. The distributor is the bank. They carry the paper. So the distributor is muddying the water up, saying, "I'm your buddy. Give me your best price. Great job in getting it spec'd," so that you don't ask, right? So you don't ask, well, what about, can I give you a price on the baseboard side of the business? There's 50,000 feet. Oh, no, no, no. We're going to submit our product, our other. So you've got a friendship, but the foe and the friend. So it's a very, and lastly, it puts that distributor in such a terrible position that when a manufacturer asks to make joint sales calls, they will give you lip service and say, yes, we'll go make joint sales calls, but they will cancel the morning of, because they don't want to be seen in the market with you promoting potentially the competitor's product, which the competitor will find out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my experience, in my limited experience on the agency side of the business, something that I really faced was, we talked about the two key national players on the mechanical side, Wolseley, Westburn, and Emco. The agency that I was employed with was very, very close, given the product lines that they had. They had some, very strategic partnerships with one of the wholesale and exclusivity or semi-exclusive relationships with that wholesale. And then you kind of find a lot of the company starts to tilt towards that one wholesale that you have that exclusive or semi-exclusive relationship with, right? And then I walk into, wholesale or, the other wholesale or the other distributor in the marketplace, and I say, hey, I got some of these, products that are interesting. I think you guys could really do well with it. It complements a lot of your other brands. And the answer that I had a lot of the time was, well, you guys do a lot of business with our competitors, Wholesale A. I'm not really interested in doing business with your entire company unless I know for sure there's an exclusivity agreement in it for me or something like that, because you're in bed with them and I don't want you, getting under the sheets here. Like that's kind of almost this, like you said, it's, that oil and water relationship where people seem to, you're guilty by association.
100%. And this is why and if you clear your mind for just 1 second, to this very point, clear everything that we've spoken about, because the one word kind of pulls it all back in, and that word is control. The manufacturers, do not want to be controlled by anyone, not the plumber, the mechanical, definitely not the distributor or their agent. The plumbing distributor, the bank, they don't want to be controlled, but yet they want to control the manufacturer, the agent, the plumber, and the mechanical. And then it trickles all the way down. The agent, you don't control me. So this control word comes into play day to day. And I found in my career, which has been a very, very great career, started in 1984. My sales profession, it was April of 1984. What I found out and discovered about myself, having a territory as a independent rep agency who was the middleman. Now a rep agency, which of course you gentlemen have had experience there, you represent everyone. You represent the manufacturer, you represent the distributor, you represent the outside sales rep for the distributor, the plumber, the mechanical, the general contractor, and the end homeowner. And the set example, or the example would be the boiler that you represent does not work on a project. The general contractor holds back payment to the plumber holds back payment to the distributor holds back payment to the manufacturer, and typically there's no communication in the channel because of that oil and water. And then the manufacturer finally discovers through their accounting department that there's money being held back. You, the agent, get the phone call, and now you get to go all the way back through the channel and start hand-holding and schmoozing it all the way back. So that agent does have, without a doubt, in my mind, the toughest role in the entire channel, because all through all that, they have to maintain their integrity for a 5% to a 10% commission payable. It's brutal.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It definitely, from my experience, it is unfortunately, one of the more thankless segments of our industry. Although, there's in a lot of cases, a lot of organizations don't prefer to use agencies for whatever reason. Either they have enough of a market to have factory reps in there. And I also know a lot of organizations that choose not to do business with the agencies because of that, they know that, if I do business with X agency, I know that they're not really, that shuts me off to getting into this distributor or that contractor. So I think there needs to be kind of a bit of a step back and take a look at the industry and take a look at your role in it and take a look at what are we missing. And I think the biggest thing that from my experience I can talk about outside of the individual relationships that I had from a broad perspective was, again, it comes down to one
You
word:
bet.
trust. I think that's something that's really, really starting to erode. And maybe, bringing this back to something that you said a lot earlier, Jeff, talking about the phones and how everything is kind of, going away from that relationship sale. Does it seem almost as though with the advent of more and more new products, new technology, availability of information, does that almost dilute our industry and dilute the amount of products and services and available options? I mean, it's a good thing for a contractor or owner to have a lot of options, to be, to want to install, to want to be ahead of the curve, to want to be energy efficient. And that makes great sense. But does that in a way make the, the job or the role of a wholesaler or a distributor that much more difficult? Is there, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or Helen, has a preference on what they want to use, and that preference can come from an engineer or from the owner themselves. Do we almost need to kind of, I know that there's a lot of organizations that are consolidating and really trying to make their line offerings more concise and more to the point and more selective, and build on that, that movement, that, two-way partnership and real partnerships with organizations. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's why I actually wanted to ask, like that transition where, back in the day, the salesperson, whether it was a manufacturer's agent or a sales rep, they had to really know their products, right? Like they had to have answers, right? And a lot of it is because you couldn't use your rotary phone, I think was still in the
100%.
70s, or Greg?
100%.
um, so, so I mean, you had to actually know your product, the technical aspects of it, like have all that info available to you right away. And I think that the agent back then understood all facets of that business, which is why the relationship
Yep.
blossomed.
100%.
When you had your plumbing, your journeyman tell you, hey, you relate well to people, so on and so forth, you should get into sales. Did you go after and
Good
take
question.
courses?
So what I chose to do was, coming from the street, I wanted to learn from the street up first. Interesting you asked that question. So to stay on point or to move into the sales side, and the career, what, when, why, and how, we've talked about, just to recap, if you wouldn't mind, because there's a couple of key points, then we'll come right to that. The
Yep.
clumsy two-step distribution channel that we all work within in North America. The Canadian market, the market you gentlemen are serving and looking to offer your services deeper into, you're right. Deep down in all these conversations are the little nuggets to help you actually target the rep agencies, actually target manufacturers, actually target plumbers, mechanicals, and plumbing wholesalers to, you're right, better understand really what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what are our competitors doing right, what are they doing wrong. So I didn't want to skip over the fact that as you look at for media, who are our target audience? When we get to them, what and how can we help them with our services and our experience that we bring? Knowing that is to say, okay, we know the industry is in its own crazy way a two-step distribution channel where everyone's got their part in the process: the manufacturer, the agent who's that middleman, the distributor who's the money, the engineer who signs off and gives you the authorization to allow your product on the job site. So it's a process that's in place and it's been working. It's not broken. Now it's for you folks to find where can we in each of in the entire process, what can we bring, because you're bringing a new service. What you gentlemen are doing is pioneering, which is exciting. And I'd love to still be part of, uh, as your advisor from the outside in. Please feel free to use my experience uh, at no charge. I want to be sure I see as we're recording, so it's no
Absolutely.
charge. Okay, so I welcome it because here's why. To answer your question. So here I was working with this plumbing agency, and they gave me a territory, 750,000 people. It was a nice, easy, clean territory. They had already had business. There was a gentleman who was in the market for some 15 years prior. So he had already had relationships with the customers, and business was just about ready to explode. So here's an example. Maryland, a well-known product in the nation. Well, it turns out their factory was no more than 45 minutes from my territory. So it was close enough. So you know yourself, the some of the phrases that you live by every day. Firstly, you should be strongest, closest to home. So for media should be strongest, closest to home in that Calgary market. So there I was now with $1 million, $1.2 million in his business. And I only was paid, so I was only paid a bonus on top of my $35,000 salary on the first dollar over $250,000 that I had to sell every month. So on the $251,000, I was now getting a percentage or a bonus. So that, Jeff, got me out of bed. I'm a self-starter. Anyhow, us as tradesfolk, we're early risers. Get up, take the world on. What I realized in 1984 through 1986 was that I really, really love to pioneer products. I realized that I didn't like to what didn't work for my personality was to protect the business. So if you think about it, because I circle back to a key point in our nation, our little 35, $36 million nation, when you look at companies such as Bibby St. Croix, when you look at IPEX, when you look at Keep Right, when you look at the strong names who Vresh had alluded to earlier, through buying up small companies, they all of a sudden, is so important, are now positioned themselves to have that 80, 90 market share. Well, every one of those managers for those said companies and others, they wake up every morning and they put their uniform or their war clothes on, and they have one goal in mind. One goal: protect the business, protect the business, protect the business. And they'll get pounded on if they lose share. Say IPEX ends up eating some share from Bibby. So next thing you know, the Bibby folks are pounding on the sales team. Well, I learned real early that my preference is to start at nothing. I want to take a brand new item and pioneer it to a market. So yes, Jeff, I learned through the school of hard knocks, and the teachers that taught me, they were great teachers. Here's day one, April 4th, 1984. Frank Guerin. Greg, why do you want to get into the sales game? Well, Frank, I understand you can make a lot of money. He said, well, Greg, you're 100% correct. He said, well, in the agency business, it's so important to remember that there's two ways to lose a line. A, doing too good enough job, or doing too good a job, or B, not doing a good enough job. And Greg, we've got 13 lines, and we promised every one of those factories that we'll give them constant, consistent growth, not this type, just consistent growth. So Greg, you need to give every line their required time every day, all day. And you're right. You said it early. Those days were 10, 14, and 16-hour days, legitly. No, hey, I worked 16-hour days. We're talking about pioneering the brand. So here we go. I started at 35,000. I realized by 1986 that I was earning now 50 to 60,000. How was I doing that? Building the brand and realizing that when they taught me, Greg, go out to the influencer and who were influencing the channel. So they taught me early on that if we were introducing new whirlpools to the market, which we were, go to the builder. So I'd go to the builder with my little caravan, and I'd bring the builder from the office down into the parking lot and get him to sit in the tub, which I pulled out of the vehicle. Grassroots selling. We're talking be and do everything different. It's on the list. And of course, the builder would say, can I get that for lot 66 and lot 52? And I'd give them no charge. 3 whirlpools. And next thing you know, you ready? We had one distributor at $1.2 million. In 6 years, I grew the business to $4.5 million, and every plumbing wholesaler had it on their shelf. But I managed it and grew it so that everyone was still enjoying the profit. Everyone had the same price. It was really now which distributor the plumber wanted to give the order to. So you're right. It was a school of hard knocks. I taught myself to learn early on voice inflection, eye contact, body language. I taught myself early on and was taught to learn from rejection. Gillespie, get over it. Don't burden yourself with it. Learn from it. What did you do wrong? Why did they say no? What did you position? Did you try to close it too early? Did you not know your product? Did you not know your competitor's model number? Did you not? Did you not? Did you not? So I chose early on to say, okay, I thought Jeff was going to buy the product. The presentation was good, but Gillespie, you didn't do the research. Jeff wasn't the decision maker. He was the gatekeeper. So I learned early on. So then, to your point, Jeff, after 7 years, I said to myself, Greg, you need some finishing school. You need some schooling. And that's when I sold my agency at its peak. Sold the agency and went to work for Crane Plumbing Canada, which was, of course, a publicly traded company, a $2 billion corporation. And I went into that world with my eyes wide open, to your point, to learn about checks and balances, corporate America or corporate Canada. And of course, monthly reporting, because of course they're publicly traded, the politics, the people, the wolves in sheep's clothing, the games, the processes, the process for a process. Wow. Yeah. So my schooling and finishing schooling was with the classic corporate publicly traded company, and man, did I learn a bunch.
Yeah. See, that's where like so that's kind of where I was going with that was like what I found has happened is there was a lot of people that got into sales because somebody said, you know, hey, Greg, you know how to talk well. You should be a
You're right.
salesperson. And I equate that statement as, Greg, you know how to floss your teeth. You're a
Right.
dentist,
Well said.
right? um,
Well
and
said.
so I found that what had happened was you could be a great salesperson as long as you had the lowest price, right? And people stopped actually selling products, right? I find that people would go in there and you see it wholesale to wholesale, manufacturer to manufacturer. You'll have an equivalent product where your company has spent millions of dollars inventing this. It's the better technology, but you must be the lowest
Bingo.
price. And therefore you're not actually selling, you're actually just taking
100%.
orders, right? And so for the role of the salespeople, I don't know in what process where a good salesperson is actually hired because of their contacts or because of their
I think it's
ability.
the ability when they realize the employer's looking for an individual that knows how to cold call, has a feel for it, knows how to prospect, but more importantly, knows how to bring value and understands that you're a sales maker, not a sales taker, or order maker, not an order taker. There's a big difference out there. That plumbing distributor, classic order taker. What can I
Yeah.
ship you? Can I have my competitors' back orders? What did they back order? Give me that. Can you pick up? I always said the version. A plumbing distributor would say to Jeff's Plumbing, if Jeff's Plumbing called Emco and said, "Can you pick up a 4x8 by 3/4 sheet of plywood for me on the way to the job site?" The plumbing distributor would, and a case of water.
Yeah.
So they're order takers. So you're right.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your comment. The plumbing sales professional, different story. That agent, that middleman, there's an art to it. I've been blessed now to take all my experience and now offer professional sales training to all levels of industry. And we're not just sales people, salesmen. Gone are the days of hucksters and selling and telling. You're 100% correct. You need to know your product inside out, outside in. You need to know your competitors' model numbers inside. Matter of fact, you need to know your competitors more than your own products.
Yeah.
Critical. So now you're bringing value, and I think when you start hearing these little nuances and nuggets throughout the training process, which you'll find out as you're evolving your business, is Price is only an issue in the absence of value. Price is
Yeah.
only an issue in the absence of value. So bring value, and now you can overcome that price objective. It's just that simple.